the problems look simple from the outside, like, oh, they're poor. They need this village, they don't have water. They have to walk a long way to get water. So simple. We go and we build a well.
Right.
And I saw one article about these wells, and they found a way to pump up water, like with using like these merry-go-rounds.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, you
Only
see
with
that
that,
article.
yes.
Yeah. People haven't read the article. They found turn these merry-go-rounds, and it'll pump water up the shaft and down into the trough or wherever.
Right.
And so while the children
play, yeah.
they're also pumping water. It's so great. We built a little playground, and but now the children have to play there to pump the water. In fact, they might have actually destroyed an actual well to make this playground. And now the children have to play there. If they don't want to play there, then they have to push this. Now you have child labor
exactly
to pump the water. But you got the selfie out of it. So
I love that. And sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. A lot of the projects that happen on the continent of Africa have these huge unintended consequences that sometimes do more damage than good. And I just wish those who are in the foreign aid business would take a step back while we're rushing to save lives. And sometimes there are immediate needs. Think of the earthquakes in Haiti. Haiti's on the Western Hemisphere. I know that's not on the continent of Africa. We needed the Red Cross there. We need to feed people. We need to airlift people. We need to give them medical supplies. I'm not against that. I want to make sure your viewers understand. What I'm against is this industry that exists that sent people over every summer to go build wells and read the Bible to the kids, and
that'll feed them.
I'm against that. And again, nothing against the Bible. I'm a proud Christian brother, but that's not saving lives in the long term. Now, people might say it's saving souls. Hey, we can have that debate, but we're talking about saving lives. That's not it. I would rather we focus on building local industries, getting people to solve their own problems. Because at some point, whether it's myself, people who have left the continent, people who are on the continent, we're going to have to ask ourselves the question. And even in talking to a lot of my fellow African-American brothers and sisters in this city, the question we always ask ourselves is, how can we get ourselves together? How can we get this right? And people on the continent of Africa, we're going to have to ask that question. And that answer is going to have to come from us. We can seek help from others, expanding that circle, but we're going to have to get this right by ourselves. I want to throw this to you, and you're more, you're well-versed, better well-versed than I am when it comes to the conversation of the continent of Asia. Growing up as a little kid, I remember watching American-produced movies where parents would tell a kid as they're trying to get their kid to eat your food, because if you don't, they're starting kids in China. Would you ever hear that phrase in today's world?
No.
Probably. Why is that? What has happened to China? Talk to us about China from the time you and I were little boys. What has happened economically there?
Well, the funny thing about that is the communist government would tell kids in Chinese school to save their change to send it to the starving children in America, and capitalist America.
Ain't that funny?
Which is kind of heartbreaking. But yeah, obviously, in the past 20 years, China has, I don't want to say too much. I don't know how much, because I'm not an expert on China, but state capitalism, they've built their industries, they've industrialized big time since the late 90s, and frankly, state capitalism makes them kind of a bad actor in the international
stage, right?
Yeah, on the global stage, and it's hard for free market or a mixed economy to compete with state capitalism, but mainly they've industrialized.
They have, and Dustin, wouldn't you agree? And your viewers could, they could check this out, do the research. I believe hundreds of millions of people in China have been lifted out of poverty into what they consider middle-class living, Chinese standard. While on the continent of Africa, we're still struggling to pull those from the rural areas into a middle-class urban life. Now, is it 100 million? Is it 300 million? I've heard different numbers. Is it 2 million? The point is, China is not the same country that it was 20, 30 years ago when you and I were little boys. They're certainly not that. Why is that the case? I believe, of course, there have been many factors. State capitalism, of course, is central to that. But you cannot deny that they led the charge. They did it.
Yeah.
And what I'm calling upon people who are in the African leadership circle is I'm not saying we have to mimic China. Our change, our growth is going to look different from China's. We need to come up with the solutions. It is wonderful that we have United States and people from Scandinavia and the United Kingdom and Canada trying to produce a better life for the average African. That is admirable. But for us to have sustained development, sustained growth, it's going to have to come from the ground up. Even I, Dustin, I was born and raised on the continent of Africa in Lusaka, Zambia. Having been away from the continent for 16 years, I am not well suited to provide the answers for what people on the ground need, because my perspective has been skewed. Now that I've been here, I can offer some suggestions, some pointers, but that's going to have to come from the people there. And all I ask is those who are in the foreign aid business. I'm not saying don't donate. I'm saying let's think about the long-term solutions and not just the short-term feel-good feelings that we get out of sending $1 or $2 a month to the starving kid.
I think that's what gets to the final thing of this part was the unintended consequences. I think a lot of well-meaning people here, I think a lot of people, maybe a lot of people maybe uncharitably characterized as white saviors will be a bit triggered or offended because they feel like they really are doing good.
Sure.
They feel like they're giving a gift,
Sure.
and they don't want to see their gift disparaged or, but I think the problem with a lot of the philanthropic minded people, and it's not a character flaw, I know they're totally well-meaning, is that they think of what they have to give and they think of people receiving it, and they don't think of third parties that will be affected, and also how they might distort markets or how they might incentivize someone else to act differently now that they've implemented this aid. So one example I saw recently was there's a small shoe company in the United States that makes shoes. For every pair you buy, they send one pair to Africa.
Okay.
And you think, okay, and I think we're probably on the same page. We see where the problem is here. So if you're a person in Africa who needs shoes, this is great. But if you're someone in Africa who makes shoes, you can't compete with free.
You can't.
And now you're out of business, and now there's another needy person.
Yep.
So that's when they say it creates dependency. That's what it is, because the market distortion, you said it destroys economies.
Right.
So what is do you know of other unintended consequences, or do you have more views?
Distorting the market is the big one. Propping up bad governments, like I spoke about a few minutes ago, is obviously another one. This is how I want to frame it for people, for my friends who are in the philanthropic community. And I was fortunate enough, one of my earlier professional opportunities that I had in Kansas City was for a nonprofit foundation here in Kansas City. So I have friends in that industry, and they do amazing work, saving lives, changing community. And most foundations, or most people who are in the philanthropic world, are about sustenance now, making sure that people are able to not only survive for now, but survive going forward for years to come. So I don't mean any disrespect to people in that industry, but what I will say is every day when I drive to work, Dustin, one of the intersections, I come to a stop, it's a red light. I see hordes and hordes of homeless people here in Kansas City. Remember, America, the world's richest nation, best economy and all that good stuff. I run into the homeless people all the time. You go anywhere in the city and you'll see homelessness, or at least signs of homelessness. The question I have for people who are watching this, who are listening to this, is I always feel compelled to give my change. $1 here, if I have a Subway sandwich, break it in half, give it to the homeless person. And I'm sure the person who receives the sandwich and the $1 is appreciative of that effort, is appreciative of the gesture. Wouldn't my time be better served in focusing on getting elected people, or people to get into elected offices who focus on homelessness? We just witnessed the first, maybe even the last presidential debate of this election cycle. How many times did you hear the word homelessness? You couldn't hear anything, by the way.
No.
But how many times, let's go back, 2016 debate between Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton. How many times is homelessness brought up? Think about the governor race here in the state of Missouri. How many times is homelessness addressed? It's never addressed. You know why? Because the majority of us are fine, whether we like it or not, seeing homeless people, handing them $1 and thinking we're doing something. If we're serious about homelessness, because I am, it bothers me, Dustin, that they're human beings. It's about to get cold outside. They have nowhere to go in the richest country on the earth. And we just drive by them every day, roll up our windows, shut our doors, turn down the music, don't make eye contact, and we think we're doing something. Hand them a little $1. Why not focus on what causes homelessness in America? Go out west, San Francisco, LA, Chicago. When I've traveled to these places, I'm literally stepping over people who are homeless with their signs, with their kids. So it's the same concept with the continent of Africa. You think you're doing something by donating, but you're not addressing the issue. We need to pivot over to situations, to ideas that allow for sustained growth to address the issue. Why are people homeless in America? Why are people in the continent of Africa not where they need to be economically? We need to get to that. The bags of rice are great. The medicines are great. And I say, let's keep at it. But we need to have a twofold strategy. Feed them today and allow them, support them to find answers for tomorrow.
My response for why they didn't talk about homelessness is probably even more cynical, because homeless can't vote, or by and large, if you don't have an address, you're probably not voting. So,
nobody cares for them.
So they're not maybe politicians don't actually see them as a constituency.
Absolutely.